Good morning, everyone. Just double checking that I have everything in order. Pretty sure I do. Best just to take a good look and see before we begin. I won't be starting for 10 minutes, maybe less than that, depending on how we're getting on with this stream. Just making sure that we are where we need to be. Doesn't look like it yet. That's annoying. Imagine myself. No, I am indeed live. That's wonderful. Right, let's just double check. Are we public? Should be. Right. All right then. Okay. Card. All right, going to start the recording in a couple of seconds. Today we're looking at the body-mind connection, AuDHD theory and practice, and we are moving on from the two primary and harmed profiles of AuDHD and into the solutions. All right, so we'll look at the cycle of fragmentation and the spectrum of disruption that I spoke about earlier this week, but we're going to go into more so now the transformation that occurs and the evolution that's possible when we apply the body-mind connection theory to this problem. All right, so just to review again who I am and what's happening here. This is the body-mind connection AuDHD specialist training for teachers, parents, alternative education facilities, and SEN schools. And it is all actionable, practical, accessible core principles that can be applied immediately in order to achieve necessary aims for the well-being of these children. Okay, so anyone who's messaging me, can you stop? Because that's not helpful. Right, hold on 1 second. Just make sure we're recording before I continue. Press record. Right, back to share. All right, so popping up the title page again. Here we are, the body-mind connection AuDHD specialist training for teachers, parents, alternative education facilities, and SEN schools. This is a learning theory and child development theory for AuDHD children and teenagers. And the crux of it is learning naturally from within. And we are looking at biopsychosocial development on the organic a natural level. So the inner systems of the AuDHD child, the invisible systems that cause either health or disruption. So as you can see, this is the cycle of fragmentation that I've been talking about over the last couple of days. I didn't intend to do as many sessions as I did this week, but fortunately that's what's occurred and it was necessary. So I'm pleased about that. Right. So we have the foundation of fragmentation. 95% of autistic individuals report trauma history rooted in chronic sensory overstimulation and invalidation. We then have the hypermobility connection, where AuDHD individuals have a 7.4 times higher prevalence of hypermobility, calling proprioceptive noise and constant survival state. So the body plays an enormous role. And I talked in depth about the two primary profiles, the narcissistic-like traits that occur with cognitive dissonance, structural dissociation, and complex trauma in AuDHD, and then the borderline or codependent-like traits that appear on the other side of the spectrum, depending on how they've been harmed in childhood, both with complex trauma due to their high sensitivity on the neurobiological level. And the way to heal that is by restoring the body-mind connection. And that is what I'm here to do. Okay, so structural dissociation and masking, we talked about the mask, about the false self that is portrayed as healthy and well and covers invisible disorder and covers invisible ill health, right? What we perceive to be personality is in fact trauma response, right? And defensive mannerisms or suppressive mannerisms that have been onboarded by the individual in order to cope with their high sensitivity. And then we spoke about the fragmented selves, the emotional parts, and the apparently normal part, and how they switch around depending on life cycle and challenges. I also spoke at length about my own personal story, and you're very welcome to go back over the videos if you haven't heard this. It was session 2, and I talked about the cost of masking. So autistic individuals are 2 times more likely to develop substance abuse problems. And the baseline for human beings is overarching, like higher for autistic individuals. They double the risk. Severe depression and suicidal ideation. Neurodivergent adults are 3 times more likely to experience severe depression due to performance exhaustion. And then the gendered burden. AuDHD females, like myself, face pressure to please, leading to internalized shame scripts, eating disorders, and freeze responses. Also, I spoke of the threat funnels, whereby in places of fear, they fawn and start to disconnect from their own danger signals and can end up in very compromising situations like I did. Right. So the economic and social collapse, the broken fuel gauge, right? Let's talk about that for a second. This is an idea of self-blindness. Chronic masking stops the ability to sense hunger or fatigue until a total system crash occurs. And this can go even further when fragmentation is consistent, rapid, and sustained. Whereby these young people grow up to be adults and they end up in traumatic circumstances and they are disconnected from the body's emergency signals. They start to become more and more and more fragmented, and the nervous system starts to shut down, and it makes them more vulnerable to harm and disorder and to a lack of control over their automated responses to their life. So it's this locked in feeling, being locked in your own body, watching yourself from the outside. It can be very frightening. So we looked at some of the statistics around that as well, but I'd like to move on a little bit today. So there's some more I'd like to speak about. Connection as the cure. The body-mind connection process is a learning and child development theory which is specialized and targeted to support healthy, sustained nervous system function and brain-body connection in AuDHD children and teenagers. It takes into account their developmental timeline, identifying all potential internal conflicts, and works to re-establish connection to lost neural pathways, disconnected learning opportunities, and latent emotional underdevelopment. Please notice those things: lost neural pathways, disconnected learning opportunities, and latent emotional underdevelopment. So the entire curriculum set out by our biology is disrupted more easily in AuDHD and can be reconnected and re-established like branches on a tree. We imagine that these children have their branches cut and the tree is still attempting to develop, but with faulty wiring, where it just keeps flipping from one broken branch to the next and not growing because of structural dissociation. When we reconnect the whole tree to the trunk, which is the heart and the central nervous system, then the branches start to flourish again. And that's what the attempt is. It's using this ideology of the tree and reconnecting all of those parts by working with the child's individual body and signaling. And I am very grateful to my great friend, Dr. Joseph Delaney, who speaks at length about this during his TRISIG model of health and medicine, right? And he speaks about the need for integrated lifestyle care inside of every provision for these children. And one of the things that he's highlighted regularly is that the nervous system presents with a multiplicity. It has a multidimensional nature, so it goes beyond polyvagal theory, and it has its reasons for doing so. And understanding the unique patterning within a child allows us to understand the branches and support their growth from what they show us, rather than trying to enforce things externally that don't fit where they are in their own timeline. The theory and practice recognizes that the brain and body are always trying to reconnect, and that the next phase of neurobiological harmony is presented through its only source of truth, the child themselves. So the education model that we've developed here, myself, company director of Sincerity School, have developed a neurobiologically specialised school plan for AuDHD. It's non-linear and opens opportunity for flexibility and movement, both daily and seasonally, allowing the child's body and brain to meet its goals with our assistance rather than our dominance. So I'm going to show you an infographic now to help in a few seconds. So applying the body-mind connection at home. I spoke a little bit about this yesterday when I identified the problem for parents and the developmental timelines that their children may be on. Some are in a more suppressed state because of fear and erasing themselves. Some are in a more suppressed state due to fear and defending themselves, right? And recognizing the defense and the symptoms of that is really important. Because one will look perfectly fine, but they're constantly calculating, right? Right, then there's the other one, which is like ricocheting between, fight or flight and shutdown, due to having no idea what's going on inside of them. But both profiles require the same thing, right? So emotion processing before taking actions or making choices, allowing, accepting, and witnessing our own emotions as part of overall health, using breath work, body movement, and nature to regulate the body system naturally, identifying and reducing false compensations. I spoke about them before. False compensations are the patterns of behavior that children adopt to avoid dysregulation internally. Everything that the problematic profiles, the harmed profiles of AuDHD present with, are because of an attempt to avoid internal emotional dysregulation. So when we start to remove the false compensations, like phone addictions, other forms of addiction, screens, intense fidgeting, some of it is hyper-focusing in a healthy way where they've developing growth patterns inside of that, and there's healthy stress inside of those things. But some of the things are just helping them suppress, and we will talk about that later. So what are they choosing to do to avoid feeling? And then taking daily inventory of our choices, allowing for mistakes, and learning to become more and more and more honest in our communication, because it heals chronic stress. The truth is love, and it relieves the body. When we tell ourselves dishonest things or behave dishonestly, it cements the chronic dysregulation and reinforces the pattern of behavior that isn't serving them. False compensations are seeking connection to ourselves externally, and it falls short. Now, I've shared the breathwork protocol many times, and it's more accessible to adults and teens, right? But it is sort of the cornerstone of what we do, is teaching in-depth emotion processing, and it goes on much more deeply, much more intensely than we would first anticipate. Some people mistake stress in the body as emotionally feeling, and it's not, because I used to feel that. I used to feel, oh, I'm feeling all the time, so I don't have to do this breath work. No, underneath stress, there is access to deeper feeling states. And when we get the body up and out of those feeling states, and we reduce that emotional energy in the body through deeply allowing it to rest inside of discomfort or emotion, and we train it to do that, the entire body system starts to rework again. So it's connecting the trunk of the tree to the branches, right? So we have the AuDHD body system, right? The problems that appear in the first instance. So there's the structural split. Neurodivergent sensitivity often leads to structural dissociation, where the mind divorces from the body to survive overwhelm, and that is happening constantly, and it is not always easily identifiable. Structural dissociation is when the mind takes over, hijacking the body's natural intelligence to avoid processing overwhelm. The threat funnel is chronic dysregulation and creates locked behavior loops that avoid genuine emotions like joy or grief. Can't access any of them because you're in a stress state constantly. Everything is false. So prisons of personality, masking and shutdown become rigid defense tactics to obscure the true self. And children have no idea this is happening, right? And many infrastructures there to care for them currently don't know any of this either, right? So if you're watching this and this is useful, share it, please. So the power of choice, aligning conscious wants with unconscious choices, transforms defensive behaviors into active preferences. Allowing children choice is healthy reconnection of the neural and physiological pathways, the trunk and the branches of the tree. Flow state is important. Introducing choice and emotion processing. We're looking on the right side of the screen now. This is what we're looking towards. It's the healthy AuDHD profile. It's what I'm going to talk to you about today. The one that is not harmed, the one that is not traumatized, the one I now am because of the work I've done on myself, and it's what I'm sharing with you. So by introducing choice and emotion processing, individuals can dissolve these rigid threat funnels and return to a natural state of body-mind flow. Flexible variability. A healthy system supports multiple nervous system states, cross-referencing each other simultaneously. A healthy system allows to dissolve the split. So the deeply feeling and processing underlying emotions allow the mind's rigid barriers to soften. And that's where health and well-being and happiness and evolution for AuDHD can occur. Now, I've spoken about that too, but we're going to talk about it a bit more now. This is the pathway for AuDHD evolution. This is the true profile for AuDHD individuals. It gives access to incredible gifts and abilities, immense potential, and all we need are in-depth and family-supported lifestyle changes. So if we have a look at this screen here, the trajectory of flourishing, the AuDHD body-mind. 1. The neurological tax of mainstream schooling at the minute has top-down referencing, and they are bottom-up processing, so it doesn't fit them. They have to be in their apparently normal part, their mask, all day, which increases allostatic load. The biological wear and tear from constant survival mode fractures physiological homeostasis and drains energy needed for learning. They can't learn when they're chronically dysregulated. Now, the emotional parts build up trauma and rage, and structural dissociation continues. In order to transform this process, and we are in the middle of developing schools that will allow for exactly this, and it is ongoing, and you're very welcome to send us a donation or get involved as a volunteer. The first one is the bioelectric pillars of, hold on, excuse me, starting to learn how to work. So the bioelectric pillars of care, right? So let's have a look at those. Light, which allows for circadian reset, maximizes natural daylight to regulate biorhythms. Sound, neural entrainment, utilizes 55 Hz tones to enhance alpha brainwaves and sensory gating. That means using their sensitivity productively, right? To summarize, using light, sound, nature, and movement to create pleasant sensation, to encourage the child to reconnect to themselves and reframe that belief internally that connection to myself is unsafe, which is what they're suffering from. So somatic integration, intentional movement generates piezoelectric charges to discharge stress. And nature or grounding, direct earth contact stabilizes HPA access. And it also allows for the brain to reset. The default mode network in the brain needs green time, particularly for AuDHD profile children. They need regular nature breaks to restart the process of learning again. If they're in a classroom all day, or only getting a little bit of nature a day, then their brain starts to deplete its resources. I used to struggle with this. We get till 1 o'clock in the afternoon, I can't do anything else for the rest of the day, and I'm going to bed at 6 or 7. That's starting to change for me now, right? And it's because of recognizing the need for rest and relaxation in nature. So I'm going to talk you through one of the core elements of the school system that we have in development now. And it's recognizing 3 stages inside of the child that are in existence at all times, and how we move the culture of schooling and education to meet the stage they're at. And each one includes light, sound, nature, and movement, as well as learning. So stage 1 is connection to self, roughly applies between the ages of 2 to 4. We are re-establishing internal safety. The child listens to interoceptive signals through low demand sensory play and breath work. Dismantling the mask, it stops performing and trusts intuitive experience. We support bottom-up processing, gathering sensory facts, and we do not tax the children at this age to engage socially unless they want to, right? The aim is to let them dictate their own responsiveness in their own time. The next phase is connection to others, ages 5 to 7. Now, this requires relational safety and co-regulation. This is where we begin to introduce a more structured and more supportive network of connectivity, allowing the children to get to know others and have social learning become conscious, right? So we practice self-advocacy. We model co-regulation. Comfort with discomfort is what co-regulation is. Staying in a calm state, allowing the child to naturally evolve through the emotions that they feel and adding no story to those emotions. Right now, we give children the wrong message that to have big emotions is wrong, and it is reinforcing structural fragmentation. What they need for their development is to process emotion. And we are unbothered. Right? We're unbothered, right? And we can sit with them and be unconditionally positive in our regard and our presence to allow that natural process to occur. Allowing them to begin choosing, right, within their own window of tolerance. Allowing choice-led integration. Collaborative tasks are introduced within the window of tolerance. The role of the loving witness. Educators provide validation without forcing compliance. We're not always good at that. Stage 3, connection with the world, ages 8 to 11. Authentic contribution. This expands identity to the community, initiating independent projects. Meaningful achievement. Projects initiated and managed from a state of regulation and strength, and we do not push beyond that. Harnessing monotropism. Identifying and supporting the child in identifying their own preferences, interests, and specialisms. AuDHD children are inclined towards specialism. And from that specialism grows a multiplicity of thought and capability. The branch of a tree has a direction of its own. We look to the child to see what the direction is that they feel most replenishing, nourishing, and fundamental to their core self, with the belief intact that they have a unique pattern of learning and a unique talent, gift, or interest that will fuel their education if we support it in the moment it arrives. So we allow them to specialize early. And we use that to encourage them to become more community aware, more heritage aware, more meaning, place, and space consciousness. We give them a sense of meaning, a sense of place, and space within to be themselves inside of that meaning and place. For example, if you have a school with Irish children, we give them Indigenous history, we give them spiritual history, we introduce them to community. We give people names, faces, and tasks, and we allow that to be understood by the children. We create a cocoon of connection around them so that they start to see that they have immediate influence over the world at large. And though the world may still be so small, between ages 8 to 11, we permit that. Now, the trick with this for our junior school element is that every day we have embedded inside of these stages the option to come down. So a child of age 8 can come down into connection to others without the demand of community, without the demand of expressing themselves, without the demand of individuating, because of where they might be that day in their nervous system. And the same applies for the younger children. If they are in a place where they feel more open, they want to explore a bit more, we embed that experience, right, inside of where they've shown up. So we allow children to dictate where they are, and we do not tax the nervous system by going beyond their window of tolerance. We do also give the room for them to expand beyond it before we might imagine they'd be ready, and see how they get on, if that's what they choose. And we can tell by how regulated or dysregulated they are. Right? I mean, if we think about this as adults, when we go to work or we go home, sometimes we go to work and we do not want to talk to anyone that day. That's a nervous system response. We will respect that because it's telling us something about what the body is doing and what the body needs. And I have a deep respect for the process of absorption, where when we don't tax the body, it reorganizes itself around what is most useful for their next lesson, next challenge, next idea, next creation, next phase of existence. We let go of all parameters and ideologies. It's a beautiful way to operate. I never know what's going to happen each day, and I don't need to know. It's a beautiful way to be, staying in the moment with the children based on what their body tells them, reinforcing the body-mind connection in totality. So from ages 12 to 18, we are hoping that we've reestablished the body-mind connection. But again, connection to self, connection to others, connection with the world will still be allocated with each single phase of their existence from age 12 upwards, and particularly notable at points of puberty and also at points in later teens where their brains are developing so intensely and start to do that pruning thing. They start to cut away based on what's most important to them. It's when they're most easily influenced, right? So we allow for the nervous system to be supported and listened to there as well. So creative sovereignty, ages 12 to 18. From sanctuary to sovereignty, adolescents move into project-based learning for entrepreneurial ends. So they start to build projects that are yearly called Dharma dissertations. And that's how we assess them, no exams. And they use multimodal means. They can source influence from research, from community members, from the world at large, from their own personal history. It needs to have meaning and personal significance to them. And you will find that their brain and their body expands to match their own interest and enthusiasm. We use four core teachers inside of the Sincerity School model, which is the specialization for AuDHD: evolving interest, enthusiasm, emotion processing, and something else. I forget the last one, but they'll come up eventually. But what tends to appear when ADHD drive to hyper focus and the autistic drive to tunnel deep, both of them are fulfilled. You find that there's certain gifts that appear, and one of them is polymathic synthesis. There's this capacity to connect lots of things at once. So and the definition of intelligence is to make links. And you find that with AuDHD, being able to make links across multiple contexts or multiple subjects becomes possible for them. Where we attempt to do that academically already for them, their bodies are naturally inclined to do that based on their own interests and enthusiasms if we listen, and it works with their brain, so their branching becomes wider and greater internally. Their internal systems start to function optimally, and beyond just coping, they move into a thriving state. The final thing, right, is something called metacognitive attunement, where they have this capacity to think about their own thinking and think about their own doing and respond according to their emotions and according to their thoughts from a much higher place that's more neutral. And they also are able to take in lots of invisible information that they couldn't do previously in a state of fragmentation. Very excited. So the outcome is the radiant body. It allows for chronic disease prevention, reversing adaptive stress, prevents lifelong systemic damage to endocrine and immune systems, and allows for permanent health and happiness. A healed body-mind connection leads to flexible nervous system, high creative output, and joyful engagement. So the final goal and flourishing: from within they glow. Trusting a child to learn naturally from within is the most powerful mechanism for lifelong flourishing. So I spoke about it already, the simple concept with big results, flexible learning, right? So we want to maintain that connection with their very unique inner world. Children are dreamy and in the moment anyway, right? And by honoring this pathway for learning, it helps. So the connection to self, 2 to 4 years, maintaining their inner world. We put a lot of play, nature, and somatic movement and breath practices. Not really concerned with academia in that phase. Low impact, low contact, child-led interactivity. Small groups of children, solo nature and movement, co-regulation time with safe adults. Think of like a lovely little bliss bubble where there's nothing to stress them. Then connection to others ages 5 to 7, the inner world and the outer world start to connect slowly. That's about preference, processing, emotion, and perception. Allowing natural relationships to shape themselves around creative activities, assisting the child in connecting with others in sensory, verbal, and co-creative ways, and they go at their pace. It's peer-to-peer in close groups, and interactivity is assisted, and self-reflection and self-awareness is also assisted. Now, connection with the world. This phase is about choice, challenge, and creativity. It's where the child begins to experiment with autonomy, cause and effect, community on a wider scale, and greater awareness of the world around them. It is the time where the child can safely, at their own pace, begin to learn how to assert themselves, effect changes, and express themselves in unique and self-led ways. I keep saying the word unique. These children are all unique. And the only thing masking that uniqueness is the harm being done to them because we are not providing them services that meet their high needs. We allow for mistake, error, and starting again in connection with the world phase, both in relationships, creativity, and personal choices. And what we've included is a living curriculum whereby relationships are part of the curriculum. We make every learning explicit, right? Emotions are part of the curriculum. Nature and community, part of the curriculum. Co-creation, the idea of serving others, part of the curriculum. Their emotional, mental, and spiritual growth is all explicit because they need that. Now, nurturing the bioelectric child, a framework for AuDHD well-being. So the problem, the AuDHD experience in mainstream education. Have a look at the image. Push-pull competing drives. Conventional schools induce chronic stress and burnout. Coping mechanisms lead to a fragmented self. AuDHD minds are monotropic and bottom-up processors, and we use that using sound, light, nature, and movement to expand and pull, draw gently their intelligence, capability, and potential out from within them. We do not enforce it. The underlying science, the body is a bioelectric system. It's a living matrix and a body-wide communication web. Our bodies are living semiconductors. And movement creates electrical and biochemical signals. And we allow the body to connect with the earth and be supported by its global electrical circuit, allowing grounding to connect us to Earth's healing energy, and giving the child comfort inside of their body and familiarity with their connectedness to all things natural and organic around them. The solution for the problem currently are the 3 pillars of regulation: nature, movement, and rhythm. Rhythm being cognitive scaffolding there, right? Where we're allowing ourselves to teach them from a place that is determined by their nervous system state and by the growth of their own internal tree. I like that analogy. I think it's good. I think I did well with that. It's lovely. I love trees. Right, so the application, a curriculum for well-being. So I've just talked about it. If you have a look there. In secondary school as well, they're core pods and funnels. They're autonomous, interest-led curriculum where they have their own projects with intensive 4-week funnels for deep dives into niche topics. We do not give them a multiplicity of topics unless they request it. They can specialize in 3 or 4 subjects, and that will open for a branching. What we fail to include inside of mainstream education currently is the child's own contribution to learning. So their creative potential and creative capacity is determined by how much space we give them. And inside of secondary school, we consider creativity, innovation, and their own imaginations as part of a design that mimics or expresses health, right? And without that expression, something is missing. And in education, that is what is missing. We are not letting the child impact the world. and they deserve to, and they can, and hopefully they will. Now, the bioelectric pillars of sound, light, nature, and movement. Body-mind connection process, which can be applied at home as well as in education systems, is a form of healthcare for AuDHD children and teens. We speak on the teenage trajectory at a later date, not today. This is because our research has shown that learning and intelligence are byproducts of well-being, what I just said. Why do I do that, right? I'm psychic. When a child, I really am. When a child feels safe, connected, regulated, and healthy, their intelligence and creative capacity increases. They are also all very different, so that biology has a predetermined curriculum within it, which we tailor our support and education to in alignment with their current preferences, interests, and choosing. When adjusting to new and deeper states of self-connection, emotions will naturally rise up, but in healthy ways. The unhealthy stress of permanent, low-grade alarm have been settled, so deeper emotional curves occur as a form of healing, processing, and transforming from within. The problem here for most people is that it can't really be measured except by the output long-term that eventually appears. Ye shall know them by their fruit. We support that through equal parts sound, nature, light, and movement in the daily curriculum for AuDHD children. They perform better when green time is provided multiple times daily. Now, there are actually 12 intelligences, right? And I will go into all of that next week. But the 10th intelligence is what we anticipate they will achieve by age 18. There's a phase beyond that I have to go into for the next session, which I'm not ready to touch yet, right? But we'll start here. The starting point, a system in survival mode, fragmentation, nervous system chronic high alert, disconnect exists, top-down teaching doesn't work and doesn't give them choice because it is cutting their branches rather than expanding them. Number 2, the healing journey, rewiring from inside out. The body regulates, the mind integrates, heart rate variability increases, allowing for greater emotional flexibility. Fragmented self parts begin to communicate and integrate. The brain's threat detection center calms down. Brain networks for imagination and self-reflection become stronger. Number 3, the catalyst for growth, creativity. It's an inner training system. The schools we build will be creativity driven. Once the neurobiological balance is restored inside of the child, we allow them to dictate how they want to initiate their own creativity with an altruistic outlook. How can I serve the world or my immediate community from my own personal interests and experiences? So it is deeply meaningful for them. Therefore, they don't need to be forced to learn. And they will use the skills they already have within them. Joe always says, Dr. Joe again, focus on what's strong, not on what's wrong. Because what's wrong only exists in fear. It softens when we're empowered. And then it's adorable. See? So creativity, the inner training system, builds a flexible, resilient brain through neuroplasticity, acts as a safe outlet for processing trauma and difficult emotions. And the next bit, choice, the path to an authentic self. Allowing children to choose is a fundamental psychological need that empowers them to become co-creators of their own reality. It fosters a strong sense of identity and intuition. It uncovers what's already there rather than forcing learning. And then we get access to the 10th intelligence, which I have spoken about. And by age 18, this is where they'll be. The outcome is emergence of the 10th intelligence. Now, it's not the only one. There are more. I will go into that later, but that's from ages 18 up, and I'll speak about it in a second. It's the natural, multifaceted intelligence of an AuDHD individual that becomes fully actualized when their sense of self is returned. The key quality is internally sourced and intuitive. It emerges when a child is freed from external expectations and begins to process information from their own body first. The body being an intelligence center, the heart being the parent of the brain and all the other processes within our system. And when we use the body to inform our decisions, we are not riding against our own natural healing process. There's a key quality of a merging of all intelligences, so kinesthetic, spatial, interpersonal, into a single cohesive and unique form of being. It's a connection-based state, a love of life, self, others, and the world. Please let's look at the vast contrast between what we've been told AuDHD is and what the potential is here inside of their evolution when we work to educate them from this perspective. It manifests as metacognitive attunement, an earned giftedness, which is deeply unique, showing empathy, the ability to see others, and action from multiple means of understanding, much of them invisible, which means they can't be measured. But like I said, you shall know them by their fruit. Their choices and their creativity will show us who they are. This is my final slide for today. Nothing is urgent where well-being opens all doors. When you come up against a challenge with an AuDHD child at the moment, if well-being is placed first, a lot of what I have shared here becomes intrinsic, intuitive, and logical. We respond to it as common sense. From within themselves, they grow. From within themselves, they know. From within themselves, they glow. Next session, we'll speak about human evolution, the development of intelligence and where it comes from, and the unique abilities of AuDHD children, which emerge from full health. That'll be on Monday, the 18th at 11 a.m. As I said before, I am available to work with people individually, in schools, with families, with children, in mentoring, with adults, in mentoring. The body-mind connection process is for everyone who is neurodivergent, highly sensitive, or identifies with the profiles of AuDHD or autism and ADHD. Now, there's overlap between the two, which I've spoke about at length. So please do not divorce yourself from what I've shared here. If it feels like it speaks to you, get in touch. All right. Have a lovely weekend. I will speak to you all again very soon.